Hello everybody and welcome back to the very first video on the Cutting Edge Action YouTube channel. Now I want to kickstart this channel with a full review on the Paragon Warlock knife. Now if you haven't seen this knife before or you're not aware of it, you are probably about to be a little confused. Okay, so what the heck just happened there? Let's get into it. Alright guys, so the first thing I want to talk about with the Warlock is of course the action. What exactly is going on when I flick that blade out? Now the key is these two buttons at the top of the case. Now as you can see, you can't see the blade at all through the top, and the blade is completely sealed inside the case until I try to grab the knife by just the buttons. So I'm not touching the case at all, or at least I'm trying not to. And then when I depress both of the buttons, the knife opens up and is then fully gravity assisted. So that means you can just give it a simple flick of the wrist and the blade flies right on out very easily. Now that action is crazy cool and it is patented, as you can see by the patent number right here on the back of the knife. And so that is why you won't see other companies designing knives with this type of mechanism. Or making any changes or improvements to it, and it's because Asheville Steel has that patent, which is very interesting. I think there are definitely some improvements that could be made to this action, but the reason you buy this knife is of course for that gravity assisted action and the way the blade seals inside the case. And there are really some practical uses for having your blade sealed inside the case. Like if your knife is going to be potentially placed down around children for whatever reason or something like that. Maybe you work in a customer's home and you don't want to be putting your knife back in your pocket every single time, but you want a little bit of security that a kid can't just walk up and use the knife. And that is a benefit of this. Basically anybody who picks this up and doesn't know what it is, they're probably not going to be able to get the blade out at all because that action is so specific with the double button press while you're not touching the blue case at all. It's very interesting. As far as the actual deployment of the blade goes, it feels extremely nice, extremely snappy, especially after you've gotten a little bit of oil worked into the knife. It feels really good and it deploys really nicely. Now the lockup on this knife, on the other hand, is not so great, which I'll show you. So I'm holding the blue handles pretty tightly now, and as you can see, I can still wiggle that blade around on the pivot quite a bit. So there is a lot of play in that blade after you've gotten it locked. Then on top of that, you also have a ton of play in this back section here, because there is absolutely nothing that keeps those two sections of the case together. And you can see that when I operate the mechanism. I'm trying to be careful here so the knife doesn't fall onto my fingers, but you can see there is nothing between those two sections of the case. Now the stiffness of the knife when it's both locked and unlocked just isn't really there because of that issue that I mentioned before, where these cases are not really connected together very well, especially at the back. I think that could be solved pretty simply by just inserting a bar at the bottom of the case here between the two sections, that the two sections of the case would slide up and down on with a little bit of lubricant when the buttons are depressed. That would be a major improvement to this knife, and it would make me a lot more able to recommend it. As far as the materials go on this bad boy, they're pretty darn good. We've got some extremely nicely machined aluminum for the two sides of our case. And then we've got S30V steel for the blade, which will do just fine. I've been using this at work quite a bit, and it's held an edge very nicely. It'll still cut paper pretty well. It's not the sharpest knife in the world, but I'm sure I could get it there. And that dagger tip does come in handy for doing things like cutting cardboard or cutting things out of the middle of other items instead of just cutting something in half. That dagger tip is really, really good at that. Okay guys, so I think the best way to wrap this video up is going to be to ask the question, who exactly is this knife for? And I believe this knife is for collectors that are truly looking for something unique, something that you really can't get anywhere else, and something that's going to be different from pretty much any other piece in your collection, whether it's an automatic, an out the front, butterfly knives, etc. This is something that you can really only get from the Warlock or the Phoenix or the other knives in the Paragon series. So I definitely want to advise against getting this as a regular EDC. I would consider this as more of a novelty collector's piece. You could carry it as an EDC, and it's definitely durable enough to do so for a decent variety of tasks, but I think you're just going to be missing the performance of a more traditional knife if you tried to EDC this all the time. So as far as the materials go, at the $250 price point, I think they're good, but they could be better. I think at that price you could have titanium handles, and that would make the value proposition a lot better. But of course, what you're paying for is that patented mechanism and this action. So it's to be expected that they would apply a certain amount of tax to their price to cover their R&D for such a patent, so it makes sense. But now they have titanium versions of this knife available at like the $700 plus price point, which I think is just absurd. The $250 one is a little bit more justifiable, and that's because this knife really does have that wow factor. Some other important mentions are that the lockup and rigidity could be a lot better, as I said before. And you, of course, can't really hand this to a non-knife person at all, because you just wouldn't want them to play with it very much. It could get dangerous. And then even if you hand this to a knife person, a seasoned knife person, if they haven't seen it before, you also have to give a tutorial to make sure they understand what they're dealing with when they push both of those buttons at the same time, because this does have the potential to cut even a seasoned knife person. Is it worth $250? I don't really think so, but I'd still buy it again because it's an extremely cool piece. It's clearly well made. It's got that wow factor, like I said before, and it's just really well done, really well executed. Just with a couple changes, it could be absolutely perfect, but it's still a really cool knife and a great addition to any collection for sure. Thanks for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know if there's any changes you think I should make to the formatting of future videos, or any changes I could make to the video in general. This has been Cutting Edge Action, signing out.